A successful executive discovers his wife is cheating, his daughter isn't biologically his, and a corporate rival is trying to destroy him from the inside. But instead of revenge, he disappears and builds a new life to strike back with precision. What follows isn't just justice. It's a masterclass in calculated payback. The corner suite on the 39th floor of Cinerteca's Westbridge Tower overlooked a skyline most would envy, but Asher Lockwood hadn't glanced at it in weeks. His focus remained locked on the performance metrics spread across two monitors. His hands moved with practiced precision, shaping the final touches for an upcoming board review. A knock at the door pulled him momentarily from his task. Naomi Quill, his executive assistant for the better part of 6 years, entered quietly. Her demeanor, typically crisp and unshakable, showed subtle signs of hesitation. She closed the door behind her, an unusual step that spoke volumes. Naomi had always been efficient and loyal, qualities Asher valued deeply. Her expression that afternoon was unlike her. After a long pause, she told him something that made his world slow. She had seen Vivian Hale, Asher's wife of 2 decades, at the Lucent Plaza Hotel the evening before. Vivian had claimed to be in California visiting her father after a supposed health scare. Yet Naomi had spotted her sharing what appeared to be an intimate moment with a man. That man, Naomi revealed with quiet certainty, was Damian Crestfield, CEO of Ascendia Pharma's East Coast division. Asher remembered him clearly from a charity banquet. Tall, silver hair slicked back, too much aftershave, and a smirk that never reached his eyes. He had noticed the way Damian's gaze had lingered too long on Vivian, but Asher had dismissed it as cocktail hour etiquette. Once Naomi left, her message echoing in his mind, Asher conducted his own inquiry. A quick search for Damian Crestfield confirmed a reputation that preceded him: 2 divorces, rumors of affairs with married women, and an aggressive corporate style that bled into his personal life. Damian was 61, a full 14 years older than Asher. That afternoon, Asher contacted Silas Trent of Greyrock Investigations, a man he had worked with in the past. Discretion was assured. The task was clear: track Vivian Hale. Every move, every phone call, every financial transaction. He requested a retrospective audit of the last half year but instructed Silas to dig further if necessary. One name was of particular interest: Damian Crestfield. When he ended the call, Asher sat motionless, his mind dissecting every moment from the past few months. Their 21st wedding anniversary dinner, Vivian had seemed distracted. The weekend trip she had canceled, claiming her sister needed help with a newborn. The sudden interest in designer accessories, including a diamond bracelet she brushed off as a gift from an old friend. That evening, Asher returned home and did what he always did. He followed the ritual. He kissed Vivian on the cheek, asked about her father, sat through dinner as though his life weren't unraveling. She replied with ease, her lies now flowing smoother than truth. Their daughter, Lena, 16, barely acknowledged the conversation, too absorbed in her phone to offer more than the occasional nod. Later, Asher climbed the stairs and stood outside Lena's room, listening to the muffled music beyond the expensive acoustic panels had installed the previous summer. He knocked, asked about her schoolwork. Her responses were brief and mechanical. Still, something in the room caught his attention: a luxury handbag resting on her desk chair. It was a Delarix, a piece not easily purchased on impulse. He asked where it came from. Lena answered vaguely, saying her mother had given it to her. The dots had begun to connect, but the next revelation came not from technology, but ink and paper. Asher returned to Lena's room after midnight, when he was sure the house was quiet. Tucked beneath a stack of notebooks was a leather-bound journal. Inside were entries that shredded what remained of his peace. April 22nd. Uncle Damien took Mom and me to brunch and shopping. He surprised me with the Delarix. Mom says not to tell Dad, because he's weird about unapproved gifts. She looked happier than I've seen her in years. May 10th. They had another dinner, just the 2 of them. Damien promised me a car if I get into Columbia. Mom says we'll work out a story for Dad later. The words burned. His daughter, the one he had rocked to sleep, had become part of her mother's deception. And worse, she seemed to welcome it. The following morning, he called Silas again. The assignment expanded. Now the detective was to go back as far as the beginning of Asher and Vivian's marriage. Every anomaly, every unexplained trip, every old acquaintance. Nothing was off limits. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived at Asher's private office. Inside were pages of timelines, photos, credit card statements, and phone logs. But what struck him hardest were the names he hadn't expected. Everett Dales, a tennis coach, circa 2011. Simon Marks, a recently divorced friend of a neighbor in 2014. And most significantly, Harlan Sutter, Vivian's supervisor at the advertising firm where she'd worked in the early 2000s. That name triggered a buried memory. In March 2003, Vivian had gone to a week-long conference in Phoenix. 9 months later, Lena was born. With a few keystrokes, Asher accessed Synertech's internal health data archives. His own blood type, AB negative. Vivian's, O positive. Lena's, listed on her school records, B positive. It was medically impossible for him to be her biological father. But instead of collapsing under the weight of that realization, Asher Lockwood felt a rare, powerful calm. This wasn't destruction. It was clarity. He had built companies on logic and data. Now, he would build his exit plan with the same clinical precision. Asher Lockwood spent the following days not grieving but strategizing. Emotion had its place, but not in boardrooms and certainly not in betrayals. He reviewed every detail Silas Trent had delivered, the photos, the receipts, the timelines. Nothing was left to assumption. Vivian Hale's pattern was undeniable. Her life with him had become a curated illusion. Instead of confrontation, Asher chose control. Synertech had recently announced plans to expand its operations to the Pacific Northwest. A leadership role was opening in the new division in Fairmont, Washington. It was framed as a prestigious move for someone seeking new challenges. To the public and to Vivian, it would look like a professional transition. Behind the scenes, it was his escape route. He formally accepted the position and initiated relocation protocols. His estate planner finalized asset transfers. His legal team, led by Colton Reyes, prepared the divorce documents, scheduled to be served after his quiet departure. At home, the routine continued. Dinners, check-ins with Lena, pretending nothing had changed. Vivian remained her polished self, planning a renovation of the living room, talking about social events. Lena focused on her school projects, sometimes disappearing for hours, offering no real explanation. Asher played his role flawlessly. The hardest part wasn't deception. It was watching them deceive him without hesitation. He noticed the bracelet again, diamond-lined, subtle but costly. Vivian had made no effort to explain it. She also began leaving her phone face down on the table more often, always within reach, never unattended. It was a performance, and she was well rehearsed. On his last night in New York, Asher made dinner reservations at their favorite Italian restaurant, the one they had gone to after closing on their home in Ridgeview Hills. He insisted they go out, just the three of them. Over wine and soft lighting, Vivian discussed plans for hosting Lena's college application celebration. She spoke about Damian Crestfield as if he were a distant acquaintance, name-dropping his new biotech initiative in passing. Lena offered brief comments between texting under the table. To any observer, they were a picture-perfect family. Back at home, Asher quietly packed his final bag. He had already arranged for movers to handle the rest. Before dawn, he walked through the kitchen one last time and placed 2 envelopes on the marble counter. The first held the divorce papers. The second, a folder containing the damning evidence, photographs of Vivian and Damian at multiple hotels, dinner reservations under fake names, shared credit card transactions, and printed emails retrieved from a hidden account. On top, he placed a single handwritten note. Vivian, 21 years of marriage. And not once could you be honest. I know about Damian. I know about Everett, Simon, and Harlan. I know Lena isn't mine by blood. Keep the house, the cars, the accounts. Consider it compensation for teaching me the cost of misplaced trust. Asher. Then he walked away. The plane to Fairmont touched down at 6:45 a.m. Asher arrived at the temporary corporate suite by 8 o'clock and by 9:30 was in his new office. Smaller than the one in New York, but with an unobstructed view of the Cascadian Range. It was crisp, efficient, and free of ghosts. 3 days later, Colton called. Vivian had received the documents. She's spinning the story fast, Colton said. Says you blindsided her. Claims she's financially devastated. She's even alleging you manipulated company funds to disappear with a hidden fortune. It was expected. Vivian had always been adept at casting herself as the wronged party. Colton had already distributed detailed financial records to Synertech's board, verifying that all asset transfers were clean and transparent. And Lena? Asher asked. She's echoing her mother. There's a post circulating on her private social account calling you a thief and a coward. It's gaining traction in her circles. Asher absorbed the news with no visible reaction. He recalled bedtime stories, science fair projects, her first soccer game. Now, Lena had become a spokesperson for lies. Should I draft a response? Colton asked.
No.
Let them speak. The truth has endurance. Publicly, Asher remained focused on the Pacific Northwest Division. Privately, he documented everything. Every accusation, every false claim, every interaction between Damien Crestfield and Vivian Hale that pointed to a larger agenda. Damien, it seemed, had underestimated how deeply Asher could dig. Behind the scenes, Silas Trent continued surveillance. Vivian was now presenting herself as a wounded ex-wife, attending social functions with Damien, spinning a tale of abandonment. Her social circles were largely sympathetic at first, but the cracks would show. They always did. Lena, meanwhile, became more vocal. Her posts filled with emotion and hashtags about trauma. Speaking engagements followed. Small ones at first, student-led panels about surviving financial betrayal. Each one a stage, each one chipping away at a reputation Asher had built over decades. He didn't interfere. He simply built. Within months, Synertech Fairmont outpaced projections. Efficiency increased. New partnerships formed. Asher's leadership style, measured, unshakable, was praised across the company. Internally, he became a symbol of disciplined resurgence. And then, one day, Silas delivered new intel. Damien had begun probing Synertech's internal systems. Small tests, harmless on the surface. But Asher recognized the pattern. It mirrored Damien's previous corporate raids. He began documenting again, just in case. 6 months had passed since Asher Lockwood began his new chapter in Fairmont. The division under his command had not only stabilized but soared, exceeding revenue targets and earning praise from Synertech's top brass. His name had quietly returned to internal rankings as one of the most effective leaders in the company. Meanwhile, the East Coast division floundered. Projects were delayed, partnerships crumbled, and internal morale dipped. Some speculated that it was because Asher had taken key talent with him. Others whispered about mismanagement. At the center of that chaos stood Damien Crestfield. Behind closed doors, Asher reviewed reports from Silas Trent, each document more revealing than the last. The surveillance had evolved from passive observation to forensic documentation. Damien's relationship with Vivian Hale, once publicly flaunted, had cooled. The social events once filled with flirtatious glamour had given way to tense exchanges. Silas recorded multiple incidents, verbal disputes overheard at charity galas, Vivian's growing anxiety over finances, and a noticeable decrease in their public appearances together. Vivian's social media presence remained calculated. Filtered photos, inspirational quotes, carefully staged family moments. But behind the imagery was financial strain. Several high-end credit cards were declined. Her attempts to secure speaking engagements through her divorce survival platform met resistance. Rumors swirled that she was attempting to secure a position on Ascendia Pharma's philanthropic board. That too fell through. Lena Lockwood, now 18, had just completed her first year at a New York university. She interned at Damien's company, her name still attached to a narrative of betrayal and abandonment. Her online following had grown, bolstered by public sympathy and curated stories of toxic childhood and emotional resilience. But something had shifted. She posted less frequently, and the tone had changed, less defiant, more hollow. Asher continued his ascent with quiet resolve. He maintained 14-hour workdays, strict routines, and an emotionally sterile lifestyle. The corner office in Fairmont was now his domain, filled with awards, market trend forecasts, and development proposals. What remained absent was any trace of the life he left behind. Then, an alert came from Synertech's cybersecurity division. Multiple breach attempts traced back to Ascendia's internal network had been detected. The pattern mirrored those Asher had observed years before when Damien attempted a hostile acquisition of another firm. This time, the target was Synertech. Asher initiated a confidential audit. With Colton Reyes overseeing legal compliance and Silas feeding background details, a meticulous case began to build. Every unauthorized probe, every irregular transaction, every contact between Damien and ex-Synertech contractors was documented and categorized. Asher didn't publicize it, he simply prepared for impact. While Vivian's influence continued to diminish in elite circles, Damien struggled to maintain his empire. Ascendia's stock dropped sharply following a failed merger. 3 board members resigned. Rumors of internal corruption surfaced. Investors began to distance themselves. Still, Vivian clung to the illusion of stability. She appeared at events alone, claiming Damien was deeply focused on innovation. She pitched herself as a resilient speaker and tried to publish a memoir. Publishers passed. Her narrative, once compelling, had grown stale in the face of mounting contradictions. Lena remained loyal to her mother's version of events, but even she was beginning to encounter fallout. Her position at Ascendia was downgraded. Invitations to panels slowed. Media outlets began asking tougher questions. One journalist referenced conflicting timelines between Vivian's memoir drafts and court records. Another pointed to evidence of coordinated online attacks on Asher. One's linked to Lena's IP address. Asher remained silent. He never released a public statement. He never retaliated through the press. Instead, he expanded his portfolio, secured additional partnerships, and deepened internal controls at Synertech. And then the SEC began sniffing around Ascendia. Unusual trading activity, sudden asset transfers, ties to firms previously accused of corporate espionage. Silas's next report was simple but telling. They're crumbling. Colton's advice was cautious. Wait. Let them dig themselves deeper. Don't strike yet. Asher agreed. His strategy had never been about reaction, it was about timing. Each move placed with surgical precision. Vivian and Damien had built their power on illusions, influence, and manipulation. Now, both were seeing their carefully crafted images begin to rot from within. Lena remained the only variable he hesitated to confront. Despite everything, Asher had refrained from revealing the full truth about her parentage or her complicity. He had protected that secret longer than he'd protected his own name. But time was running out for all of them. By 2021, the storm Asher Lockwood had forecasted began to break. His promotion to executive vice president of Synertech's global operations was formalized with little fanfare but massive impact. The Fairmont division had become the company's crown jewel, and Asher's steady leadership, free from theatrics, rooted in structure, earned him the full confidence of the board. That same week, Lena Lockwood graduated from university. Asher didn't attend the ceremony. He watched the live stream in silence, observing how the young woman who bore no trace of his features accepted her diploma with a radiant smile, posing for photos with Vivian, now visibly aging but still attempting to preserve an air of elegance. Lena had her mother's theatrical flair and Harlan Sutter's angular jawline. The resemblance to her biological father had become harder to ignore. Silas Trent's next report painted a shifting picture. Lena had begun her first full-time job at a marketing agency in Midtown Manhattan, ironically, one of Synertech's former partners. Vivian, no longer accompanied by Damien Crestfield, had started appearing alone at galas, her once glittering image now shadowed by gossip and declining invitations. Meanwhile, Damien had reemerged in public with a woman nearly half his age, a junior analyst from a competing firm. Behind the curtain, the situation had deteriorated. Ascendia Pharma was under federal investigation. The SEC had launched a formal inquiry into stock manipulation and unauthorized corporate access attempts. Internal emails revealed communications between Damien and former Synertech employees regarding takeover strategies. Asher's team had supplied key documentation, meticulously organized and time-stamped. When Colton Reyes called with the update, he offered the obvious next step. "It's time. You have enough to bury them." Asher's response was calm, almost detached. Let it fall on its own. He wasn't seeking vengeance. He was cultivating consequences. But the fallout had already begun. Vivian's financial situation had collapsed faster than expected. With Damien no longer funding her lifestyle, she was forced to refinance the Ridgeview Hills estate. When the banks declined her application, she quietly sold the property and moved into a modest condo in Queens. Charity invitations ceased. Friends stopped responding. Publishers formally rejected her memoir, citing potential liability. Lena faced professional backlash of her own. A news article had resurfaced old claims Shed made about Asher. Posts accusing him of financial abuse, neglect, emotional manipulation. But now, those statements were being weighed against verified court documents, financial records, and the growing mountain of evidence against Vivian and Damien. Her boss at the agency asked for a private meeting. They discussed brand conflict. She was let go 2 weeks later. In Boston, she accepted a lower-paying role at a content agency, using a new surname on her email signature. Lockwood still carried weight, but not the kind that helped. The final break came quietly. Lena arrived at Synertech's headquarters in Fairmont without an appointment. She waited 20 minutes in the reception area before being escorted up. Asher recognized her immediately. She looked older, thinner, exhausted in a way makeup couldn't cover. Her voice cracked as she launched into accusations. About abandonment, betrayal, Vivian's illness, unpaid bills, canceled wedding plans. She blamed him for everything. He didn't argue. Instead, he opened a file drawer and laid out the truth. The photographs, the emails, the receipts, the genetic impossibility of their connection. Her journal entries from years ago, recorded in her own handwriting. The gifts from Damien. The car promised for her 16th birthday. The posts she made while knowingly spreading misinformation. Lena begged him to stop. But Asher continued until every lie stood side by side with its counterpoint in fact. She whispered something then, about Vivian's cancer, about regret. He didn't respond. When she reached for an apology, he raised his hand and pressed the intercom. "Alyssa, please show Ms. Lockwood to the exit." "Dad, please." "You've said enough for one lifetime." The door closed behind her. That evening, Colton called again. Damien had attempted to access sealed divorce records. His desperation was becoming visible. 3 more board members at Ascendia had resigned. Stock had fallen another 30%. The media was circling. Asher gave the instruction, "Send everything to the SEC." It was time, not for revenge, for accountability. By 2023, the Pacific Northwest Rains had become something of a comfort to Asher Lockwood. From his new office atop Synertech's global headquarters, he watched the city breathe beneath shifting clouds, a landscape both subdued and serene, like the life he'd finally carved from storm and silence. The board had just confirmed his appointment as global CEO. The announcement was met with a standing ovation from department heads across 4 continents. The Fairmont division had long since become the cornerstone of Synertech's innovation. Under his leadership, the company's operational integrity had been restored and weaponized into growth. He had done it again. Rachel Marlowe, now his wife of 6 years, entered the room with her usual quiet grace. They had met at an ethics and tech innovation summit years prior, where she'd publicly challenged one of his positions on AI deployment. Her intellect had impressed him. Her honesty had kept him. Together, they raised twin daughters, Sarah and Lauren. Sharp, curious, incorruptible. That morning, Rachel brought with her a report from Synertech's newest initiative, the Integrity Program. Born from Asher's own history, it had become a global force against corporate espionage and paternity fraud. Its results were undeniable. Over 50 companies exposed for financial crimes and hundreds of families given long-denied answers. Silas Trent's quarterly report was also waiting on his desk. Asher didn't read them for emotion anymore. They were, at this point, just data. Damian Crestfield had suffered a second stroke. After serving 3 years in federal prison, he now resided in a publicly funded care facility in Tampa. His personal wealth gone, his reputation reduced to a footnote in business ethics lectures. His last known companion had left him shortly after the SEC seized his remaining assets. Vivian Hale now lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens. Her memoir had been rejected by all major publishers. Medical debt from cancer treatment mounted. Her social circle had evaporated. Former allies turned critics. Clara Penrose, once her closest friend, had written a scathing book exposing years of manipulation and ambition disguised as suffering. Lena Lockwood, now 26, worked in a small Boston office as a junior copywriter. Her once influential social media accounts had been scrubbed, now used only to share birthday photos and baby announcements. Her marketing career had collapsed after the scandal. Her engagement had ended publicly, her wedding canceled. But over time, her life took on a quieter shape. She married Noah Hartley, a tax consultant, and raised 2 sons in a modest home.
No stacks. No panels.
No reinvention, just quiet, steady living. Lena had sent photos recently. Rachel showed them to Asher. Jack, now 5, laughing over a cake. A new baby on the way. Asher kept the pictures in a separate folder. Not with company files or legal documents, but not with family memories either. He never responded. He never commented. But he never deleted them. Reconciliation was not part of his path. Closure, perhaps. But some doors stayed closed for a reason. That evening, the family attended Sarah and Lauren's high school science fair. The girls had built a blockchain application for detecting financial fraud, unintentionally walking the same road their father had paved years before. They won first place. Asher didn't clap loudest, but he watched the way they held each other up, their bond unbroken, their pride honest. They stopped for ice cream on the way home. No press.
No cameras.
No performance. Just family. The next morning, the Financial Herald published a full-page feature. Asher Lockwood, the man who rebuilt integrity. The piece chronicled his rise, fall, and quiet resurgence. The article highlighted his refusal to engage in public battles, his commitment to truth over narrative, and his enduring belief that justice was earned, not demanded. Across the country, those once connected to his downfall read the article from vastly different settings. In Queens, Vivian underlined sections with shaking hands. In Tampa, Damian couldn't hold the paper on his own. In Boston, Lena cried quietly on her porch, reading aloud to her son as the rain began to fall. But in Fairmont, Asher Lockwood simply returned to work. He reviewed Synerteca's acquisition strategy for the quarter. He greenlit another expansion of the Integrity Program. And then he joined Rachel and the girls for dinner on the back patio, watching the clouds roll across the horizon. He had learned the most brutal lesson of all, that not all wounds close and not all wrongs are repaired. But truth, patient, quiet, undeniable, had a way of outlasting even the loudest lies. He hadn't destroyed those who betrayed him. He simply left them with the truth. And for some people, that's punishment enough.